The night the lights went out in Ravenwood, people felt something strange before they saw it. Phones died, street lamps cracked, and a coldness spread through the air like winter rushing in too fast. Then the shadows began to stretch, not because of the light, but as if they were waking up from a long sleep. Neighbors watched in horror as their own shadows pulled away from their feet, rising along the walls and floors with slow, unnatural movement. A truck driver on Highway 16 recorded something impossible: a silhouette crossing the road without any light cast behind it. The figure stopped, tilted its head, and then moved straight toward his truck as the camera cut to static. Panic started to rise when people realized this wasn't a malfunction. This was the beginning of something hunting them. Emergency lines flooded with calls saying the same thing: "My shadow isn't mine anymore." Children cried, dogs howled, and the sky turned so dark it looked painted black. Everyone thought the blackout was temporary. Nobody knew it was a warning. The shadows were not following anyone. They were choosing their first victims. And Ravenwood was only the start of what was coming. Across the United States, people started noticing a terrifying change. Every person suddenly had an extra shadow. It followed them everywhere into their homes, their cars, even their beds. At first, it copied their movements like a normal shadow, but then it began to lag behind, moving a second later, turning its head when the person stayed still, or bending its limbs in ways no human body ever could. Videos leaked online showing shadows walking out of sync, looming taller, sharper, and darker than their humans. In one clip from Texas, a woman screamed as her shadow lifted its hand while hers stayed perfectly still. Minutes later, she disappeared entirely, leaving only a smear of darkness on the floor. Police advised people to stay inside, but the shadows slipped under doors and crawled across ceilings like living stains. News reporters trembled as they described silhouettes appearing in rooms without any light source. Parents kept all their lights on, but the shadows only grew more restless. Rumors spread that the extra shadows weren't reflections, they were something ancient, awakened by the nationwide blackout. And once they found someone, they never let them go, not until they pulled them fully into the darkness. Ravenwood became silent overnight, turning from a peaceful American town into a hollow shell where echoes replaced voices. When officers entered the town the next morning, they found houses untouched, food still warm on kitchen tables, televisions flickering static, and front doors wide open as if the families inside had tried to run but never made it out. The most chilling discovery was the dark streaks smeared along floors and walls, almost like shadows being dragged away unwillingly. At the local diner, plates of half-eaten meals sat abandoned while long, thin silhouettes slithered around booths, frozen in place as if waiting for someone to return. Then they found him, a terrified teenage boy hiding inside a supermarket freezer, shivering not from cold but fear so violent he could barely speak. When he finally whispered, his voice cracked like broken glass. "They hunt through the shadows. Don't let yours move." Cameras in the town showed nothing unusual until midnight, when every shadow suddenly stretched toward the center of town like they were answering a call. Moments later, the entire population vanished. No screams, no footsteps, only darkness swallowing everything. Ravenwood became the first American town erased not by disaster, but by living shadows. The terrifying truth surfaced when a classified U.S. intelligence file leaked online, exposing a decades-old secret project called Blackfall. Deep beneath a Nevada research facility, scientists had once captured a shadow-like entity that moved without light and whispered in frequencies barely detectable. The government intended to weaponize it, believing they had found a living form of darkness that could infiltrate any structure undetected. But every experiment failed. The creature resisted containment, slipping through cracks, vanishing from sealed rooms, and reappearing where no shadow should exist. The footage showed researchers speaking in panic as alarms sounded and lights flickered uncontrollably. But the worst part wasn't the creature, it was what it said. Audio enhancement revealed a low, rumbling voice repeating, "We are many." Then everything went black. The scientists disappeared, leaving only their empty clothes and charred equipment behind. Officials sealed the facility, claiming an explosion. But the file revealed the truth. The shadows didn't die, they escaped. And for years, they hid within our world, waiting for a moment when darkness would rule long enough for them to rise again. The blackout across America wasn't an accident. It was their signal. The shadows had finally come to reclaim a world they believed belonged to them. As the days grew darker, people began hearing faint whispers rising from their own shadows, soft at first like someone calling them from far away, then clearer, using their exact voices. They whispered names, fears, secrets no one else could know. Shadows leaned closer when people slept, hovered over children, and pressed against walls as if trying to crawl free. Emergency broadcasts warned citizens to avoid silence, avoid standing alone, and especially avoid bright single source light, which made shadows longer and more dangerous. But in Chicago, a major power grid failure plunged entire neighborhoods into darkness. Within minutes, residents reported tall, thin silhouettes walking between buildings, dragging their hands along the brick like they were mapping the city. One police bodycam showed a shadow separating from the officer, turning toward him and stretching its fingers around his throat. The footage ended with a thud and a long smear of black fading across the screen. As darkness spread from state to state, it became clear the shadows were evolving. They weren't just mimicking fear, they were feeding on it, growing stronger, sharper, more intelligent. And the more terrified people became, the more unstoppable the shadows became. America was losing control of its fear. The government responded with extreme measures, deploying experimental floodlights designed to burn the shadow creatures away. For a moment, hope sparked as beams of intense, white light vaporized the smaller entities instantly. But then the shadows began to merge, forming enormous humanoid shapes that towered over buildings. They moved slowly, deliberately, as if enjoying the hunt. Entire military squads vanished as black tendrils reached from alleyways and swallowed them whole. Survivors who escaped described the creatures as fear-given form, thriving on chaos and panic. Major cities erupted in disaster: New York, filled with darkness that climbed skyscrapers, Los Angeles drowned in shadows that slid through freeways, and Washington, D.C. saw the Lincoln Memorial's shadow stand up and walk away. People fled toward rural areas, but the shadows glided across fields and roads, tracking them with terrifying precision. Scientists warned that the shadows were adapting too fast. The creatures weren't weakened by light anymore. They were learning to twist around it, using darkness wherever it remained. Humanity's fear had given them limitless strength. What began as isolated attacks had now turned into a full-scale shadow war. And for the first time, America realized it might not survive until morning. With the nation collapsing, one safe zone remained a secret bunker in Colorado, reinforced with walls that emitted pure white light. Scientists discovered that the shadows couldn't exist in perfect white light, making the bunker the last sanctuary for thousands of survivors. A giant dome of glowing light surrounded the compound, keeping the darkness at bay. But every night, the shadows gathered outside, crawling along the dome's surface like insects trying to break through. They whispered in thousands of voices, calling specific survivors by name, promising safety if they stepped outside. Supplies grew scarce, and morale shattered as people realized they couldn't stay forever. One night, the dome flickered for just 3 seconds, and in that moment, dozens of shadows slammed against it, cracking the foundation. Engineers worked nonstop, but fear spread faster than repairs. Survivors cried as they heard their own shadows whispering from outside the dome, begging them to come out just for a moment. Every hour the shadows multiplied, wrapping around the bunker like a living storm. The light was failing. Hope was faint, and everyone inside knew that if the dome went dark even once, the shadows would consume every last soul in seconds. On the final night, a catastrophic failure rocked the bunker. The dome's generators sputtered, electricity faltered, and the once brilliant light dimmed to a sickly flicker. Outside, the shadows erupted in excitement, pounding against the barrier with a deafening roar, stretching their limbs across the cracking dome. Inside, survivors screamed and scrambled for safety as tendrils of darkness slipped through widening gaps. The bunker lights died entirely for 2 seconds, and that was all the shadows needed. They flooded in like a tidal wave of black smoke, swallowing hallways, dragging people into the dark with impossible strength. But at the heart of the bunker, a scientist activated a last resort failsafe. A nationwide burst of pure white light broadcast through every remaining power grid. A blinding flash exploded across America, turning night into searing daylight. The shadows shrieked, melting into nothingness. When the light faded, silence fell. Streets were empty, homes abandoned, millions gone without a trace. Only pale burn marks of vanished shadows remained. No bodies, no answers. Only a single haunting question left behind as the wind echoed through the quiet cities. Did the light destroy the shadows, or did it set something far worse free?